It is Friday, October 18th. Let's talk PlayStation. I'd like to start off, as always, with our PlayStation Plus reminder. Your October games are The Last of Us Remastered and MLB The Show 2019. You have plenty of time to download either of these games or add them to your library. Now, first news story, I want to take you back to Tuesday. If you didn't see, I did a video about a PS5 rumor. Basically, two recent occasions of discussing the possibility of backwards compatibility on PlayStation 5. Now, the first instance, again, these are recent events, at PS Erebus on Twitter, who had correctly pointed out The Last of Us Part 2's release date well beyond when it was announced, so that tells us he's got some sort of connection in the industry. Mind you, the rest of his timeline wasn't that great, but that Twitter user pointed out, hey, don't sell your old PlayStation games from PS1, 2, 3, to 4. And then the other instance was Patrick Klepek, who works in the games industry, said that he had heard in the last 2 years about PS5 that it's about the future and the past. One of the things that he used as an example was he feels as though Blue Point Games should be working on a Demon's Souls remaster, that kind of makes a lot of sense. That should be the thing that's happening. Well, unbeknownst to me, on the same day, the infamous Twitter account at Tdix sent out a tweet, not even really being subtle at all, just saying Blue Point Games is working on a Demon's Souls remaster for PlayStation 5. So, now keep in mind, Tdix, another one of those Twitter profiles where they've gotten things right, they've gotten things wrong. These are people that, you know, they got connections, but it's not a situation where they always get these concrete details. A lot of the times they might be informed of something that is correct at the time, but then things change behind the scenes. Because, you know, keep in mind, a lot of these people are sending things out well beyond when these products actually launch. So there's certainly situations where behind the scenes things change and then they're deemed not, you know, they look like they're not correct because they weren't exactly accurate. We've got another example where Colin Moriarty from Colin's Last Stand, he's gone on record a number of times to say he knows about an upcoming PS4 exclusive. He knows about a remaster that's in the pipeline, and he's surprised that it's not announced just yet. I'm not sure if this is the title he's referring to, because, well, Tdix is now referring to this being a PS5 launch title. But again, we've got Patrick Klepek's comments that he didn't come off as though that's information he knows, but rather it's something he wants. That's how I was reading it anyway. But I think there might be a little bit something to this where maybe this is actually going to be happening, which would be great. Blue Point has said that they're working on a beloved title for PlayStation 5, so that kind of already steers us in the right direction, right? They said it's a beloved franchise like 6 months ago. They've recently said that it's for PlayStation 5, so you put two and two together. Rumor, absolutely a rumor, but looks like we're going somewhere with this. Next up, in what would be considered probably the most unsurprising piece of news we've ever had on this channel, PlayStation Now will be available on PlayStation 5. Sony confirms this past week during a Famitsu interview. One detail in here, though, that I'm seeing not a lot of people discuss is that Sony has stated they have no plans to bring PS Now to smartphones, which is a far cry from what all the other major players in the streaming space are doing. Microsoft and Stadia, for example, are trying to bring their streaming capabilities basically to everything. They want you to be able to access Stadia or xCloud from wherever you are with whatever device you have, whereas Sony's not doing that. And if you recall, when PlayStation Now launched, I don't believe it was right away, but Sony had a slow rollout on multiple platforms. So it was on PlayStation 4, it was on PC, it was on certain smart TVs, Sony Xperia and Bravia displays, I believe. It was also on PlayStation Vita and PlayStation 3. So Sony's removed all that support and just kept it to just PS4 and PC. So no smartphone support. I find a bit puzzling, perhaps, but bear in mind that PlayStation Now is the only commercially available streaming service right now that has a pretty wide release in terms of its availability, the amount of games that are on the service. So, you know, they've got that going for them, but not having any smartphones being in the future, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, if you know what I mean. Which is actually a good segue into this very small piece of news, which is that, well, Google Stadia coming November 8th, so that's finally going to be out in the market for people to try and experience and have a very, I would assume, a very slow adoption rate. And xCloud is now in the early preview program. Invites are going out to a lot of Xbox users. There's only a handful of titles that you can actually test, but this is a pretty good precipice here. We're really kicking it off. We've got PS Now that's been on the market since 2014, but Google finally coming in, Microsoft finally entering the space, and this might be the start, the very early start of the streaming wars, I guess you'd call it, which really they're all fighting for, 1% of revenue when it comes to the overall revenue of the gaming space right now, but they're looking for that long term, as we often discuss. But anyway, in keeping with these excellent segues, our next news story is about a patent that Sony recently filed back in May of this year, I believe, and recently published for a controller that communicates directly with the server for cloud gaming. So this is exactly how Stadia works, more or less. This is why Google's trying to sell you just a controller and then a monthly fee, or just buying games outright, but obviously you're still streaming them. But the controller functions the same way, where this controller, you know, has the tech that talks directly to the server, right? So in a scenario right now where you're playing PlayStation 4 and you're using PS Now, the controller's input is sent to the PS4, then the PS4 is communicating with your ISP, and then that gets shot to the console that's actually streaming your content, right? Because keep that in mind, that's how PlayStation Now works, is that you're still loading these games from a remote PlayStation somewhere else, whether it's a PS3 game or a PS4. And so this controller, in theory, would function just like what Google's trying to sell you guys. It's a controller that's skipping the middleman, which would be your console, going right to the server, and reducing the input lag and making the latency low, making it feel as though it's like local play, where it's so minuscule that you might not even notice it, which is really important. That's what's so crucial for streaming to have any sort of success or adoption rate, for it to feel like you're not actually streaming it. And I already know what most people are going to argue, which is, why do something like this when a wired connection is always best for streaming and connecting to the internet? Of course that's true, but look at it from a business. I just find it somewhat silly that people say that. This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They're going for the lowest common denominator. They have to make it as accessible as possible. And we know that most people playing on a PlayStation 4 online, or using their phone, or using their computer, or connecting to the internet is probably 9 times out of 10 a wireless connection. That's how most households are. You have to work for that lowest common denominator. It has to be painless and easy. This is how I've always likened it. Remember the first time you used Netflix or Hulu and it just worked? You didn't have to think about it. You didn't have to connect, you didn't have to fix your internet settings. You didn't have to run through a wired connection to your computer or your laptop or something like that. Now, maybe you did in its infancy, but look at it today. That's not the reality that we live in. We're seeing people cut cable. We're seeing people go all in on streaming their video content. I know that's not the best metaphor, because video inherently, games require input, and that's what's important. But it's just very comparable in the sense that you have to make this extremely accessible. You can't expect everybody to use a wired connection to stream their games. It's just not going to happen. It's unreasonable to even expect that. So this is what Stadia is doing, and this is apparently what Sony's exploring, which would make sense. As we often say, patents are a dime a dozen. Companies hold thousands of them, only to use a handful of them, but this is one where this should come to market. I mean, if Sony cares about PlayStation Now, if they care about actually selling the service, if they care about a really good adoption rate, if they care about putting this controller in the hands of every single PlayStation user, which in a perfect world, let's say that this tech is incorporated into the PlayStation 5's controller, which we're going to assume is called DualShock 5. Maybe they'll call it something else, but probably DualShock 5. So just for argument's sake, it's DualShock 5 in this conversation. You put it in a DualShock 5, every PS5 is going to ship with a controller, right? So now everybody has this controller. It's not some extra peripheral that you have to put out there that's sold at like a premium of like $69.99 or $79.99, depending on the territory, you know what I mean? This is why it's so crucial for consoles to launch with a minimum requirement, and that way developers know it's always there. Sony knows it's always there. When Sony ships out a feature on the DualShock 4 in 2013 that has a touchpad on it, every developer can use that touchpad because they know everybody has it. Did that really work? Not really. We saw touchpad support for 6 months to a year. So if you ship a controller that has this technology to make streaming much more viable for a lot of households that maybe doesn't have the most favorable internet speed, there's still other things that Sony can do on their back end, which you would hope that they're doing. But when you combine all these things, you would hope that it creates this seamless experience that just works for everybody in most scenarios, which we all know that's not going to be the case. But Sony's got to do a number of things to try and get this service out there to people. The fact that they're starting to put in these big marketing dollars for PS Now tells you the company's really gearing up for it, and they have not been resting on any laurels. When you have a situation where Concrete Genie comes out with no ads, Medieval's coming out with just nothing going into it, you got all these smaller scale exclusives that are getting no buzz from Sony, which, to be honest, I want to do a separate topic on that entirely. But you can see the company's aim. If this is something we don't see, then this is just another missed opportunity from Sony. Now moving on, earlier this week it was reported by Windows Central that The Outer Worlds, which is coming out October 25th for PS4, X1, and PC, they had claimed that if you play the game on PS4 Pro, there's no enhancements. It'll basically be just 1080p, whereas on Xbox One X and PC you can get the game up to like 4K textures, and those versions have enhancements. This is a conflict, of course, because Microsoft purchased the developer Obsidian Games. Private Division still publishing the game, but this is something that people speculated. Wow, did Microsoft basically tell Obsidian that, don't put any enhancements into the PS4 Pro version, make sure that the X1 X and PC versions are the best places to play it? Well, apparently this is false. Private Division later confirmed on Twitter that, hey, we've got 4K on X1 X and PC, and then on the PS4 Pro, we've got a 4K upsampling from 1440p, I believe. And that's not a bad thing. PS4 Pro is the lesser machine out of all three, so a lot of PS4 Pro games, when they get their enhancements, it's usually upsampling, checkerboard rendering, or what have you. It's usually a sub 2K resolution. That's fine. You still get good performance, but those are the enhancements. That's what the machine is capable of. And so that's basically dispelled. Now I'm also hearing, and I haven't been able to confirm this myself, but We Happy Few, another situation where that game comes out for PS4, but the developer Compulsion Games was purchased by Microsoft. Apparently We Happy Few does not have any PS4 Pro enhancements. I couldn't confirm that in the time that I was about to record this video, so you guys can inform me on that, but that may be a situation behind the scenes. I'm seeing a few people and a few journalists go back and forth on trying to figure this out, if that was really a thing, and if there is something going on behind the scenes where Microsoft is saying to their recently acquired developers, hey, we know that you're finishing up these PS4 Pro projects, or these PS4 projects, mind you, but basically don't put any extra resources or talent into it. I guess they're outsourcing some of the patchwork or any additional content coming to those games, or they're halting content for those games or those versions of the game. But that's all unconfirmed, completely a rumor. So that's kind of where this story sits right now. Otherwise, at the start of the week when this was being reported initially, kind of a big deal, right? Because, Microsoft's basically bricking the PS4 version, well, really PS4 Pro version, to encourage sales of the other version, which I would say that it's pretty disingenuous to shaft those customers, because they're still buying your software. Microsoft would still be the owner of that developer and thus the owner of that IP, and see the sales, although that might be different for Outer Worlds because Private Division is still publishing that game, so there is probably already a contract in place to where that game, maybe Microsoft's not seeing any sales from the PS4 version, so maybe there would be a better case for that in terms of Microsoft saying, don't put too much into this version of the game, but that's not the case from what we're hearing. So any other rumors that we are hearing so far, we don't know if that's true or not. Next up, Sony Interactive Entertainment in Japan has announced their December 3rd annual Game Awards event that they do. We don't really talk about this ever because it's just a Game Awards event in Japan, so no news comes out of it or anything like that. But I believe this is the first time that Sony's finally straight up acknowledging their 25th anniversary, which is coming up. It will be the 25th anniversary of PlayStation from the original launch in 1994 in Japan. So this is a big deal. 25 years, you gotta expect they're doing something, but I believe this is the first time the company's really acknowledged it in the sense that, there's an event going on and where, they've created imagery for it, right? So I don't really know what to expect. You would think that, okay, this is the 25th anniversary. It's a big deal. They got to do something. I think if it was the start of the year, you'd go, oh, yeah, they're going to have a PSX. It's going to be a big deal. Maybe we'd see PS5. That was the big conversation. We've had those conversations. But now we know the timeline here. We've got information about PS5. We know we're really not going to get a real reveal until early next year. And so I think this is a really weird, tough spot for them where if they're not ready to show PS5 stuff, then they just can't show it. And it sucks that maybe the 25th anniversary will kind of come and go with nothing special going on. But there's got to be a little bit of give to it. Maybe we could expect a special console or something. Or some free themes on the store, which they've done for the 15 year or the 20 year. They've done that. I mean, they do small little occasions for the 5-year increments. I mean, 30 years is going to be a big deal, and that'll be well into the PS5 life cycle. You're probably going to get a special edition PS5 or something like that come to market, but 25 years, still impressive, so just keep that in mind going into December. I mean, there's got to be something going on where Sony will make a little bit of a deal out of it, and you would think that they'd want to celebrate the occasion. Moving on to our Death Stranding news, if you haven't seen or heard, but journalists are currently playing the game right now. That's all they're allowed to say up until November 1st. That's when the embargo will lift, so you can expect Death Stranding reviews on November 1st at these times for your local time zone. Get ready. Very good sign, actually, that the publisher is allowing a week in advance for reviews to go out. That's usually a telltale sign that they're confident in the game's quality. It's not really a bad sign, but it's not really a good sign either when the review embargo lifts a day prior or the day of the game coming out. So the fact that it's a week out tells you that Sony thinks they've got a really quality title on their hand, and they think it's going to be, it's going to do well. They want to create buzz, they want to create conversation, and to have a full week of that event, that press coverage going out, of talking about the game, of footage being released. If there wasn't already a big conversation surrounding Death Stranding, it'll just spread like wildfire come November 1st. Now, there's one thing we learned about the game, though, which is the install size of the game, 55 gigabytes. So if you're going to be there November 8th, playing the game day one, make sure you got 55 gigs open. Not the biggest, but also not the smallest install size. Usually a lot of Sony games fall in the 25 to upwards of 50, 60 range, so it's not really unusual, but 55 is what you'll need to be good. Now let's get to Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate, this name I'm not going to try and say, but you have won. I'll contact you very soon via email or Twitter if you would like to win a $10 PSN code. We do this every single week here on Let's Talk PlayStation. Follow the link down below. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I will announce a winner next week. I'm trying to pay for your games, so let me. But anyway, those are all the news stories I want to talk about with you guys from this past week. As I mentioned, our Tuesday video was about the PS5 rumor regarding backwards compatibility, and I apologize the video was so long, but the reason why it was so long is because I knew it had the potential of getting shared around, sent to other sites, creating off-site conversations and things like that, which is fine, but that's why I try to cover so much information just to say, look, I know that Twitter account is incredibly inaccurate in certain tweets. You know, I reached out to that individual to verify their sources or their employment status of if they're with a studio or something like that. You know what I mean? Looking into it. Still haven't heard back from them, by the way. Taking into account Patrick Klepek's comments and then the patents. That's the thing. The patents aren't fake. They're not fake patents. Mark Cerny's the inventor. Clearly, in some way, shape, or form, there's an emulator being worked on at Sony. Will we see it? That's the conversation. That's why those videos are labeled as a rumor, and I appreciate all the support for everyone that understands that, creates a healthy conversation about it, and we go about our daily lives discussing if or if not a multi-billion-dollar company will do something with their video game machine. Now, our upcoming Tuesday video, I don't know, we're taking it easy in October, obviously. We're doing a lot of just on-camera conversation stuff because November packed with some great stuff. We got coming some unboxings. I know you guys love the unboxing videos. Documentaries, obviously we're doing those, and then some trophy stuff as well. So we're going to be doing gonna have a very busy November, December this year, which is great. And that's why October is a little bit easy, but that's it. So otherwise though, follow on Twitter at Mystic Ryan, hit that notification bell on YouTube. I don't mention it too often, but any support over at patreon.com is greatly appreciated. There's 5 behind-the-scenes videos, not behind-the-scenes videos, unreleased videos actually. I posted 1 so far, there's 4 others that still have to go up, but if you're a Patreon supporter, you will get access to 5 unreleased videos, and they're like finished videos. These are videos that I made. I figured, this doesn't really work, or I don't think this really would make a whole lot of sense, but they're made, they're finished. They're introed and outroed like a normal video would be, but I don't know, I just don't think they're really that good for the channel. So those are on Patreon. So basically, if you're a Patreon supporter, you get a video that's not really all that good, or at least that's how I saw it, but whatever, it's a Patreon thing. So I'd appreciate that, and that's it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Becker. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.